Welcome, I'm John Glanville and this is video 53 in my Calmness in Mind series where we explore common sense solutions for your calmer life. So if you've been watching all my videos in numbered sequence right through to this point, you'll know by now that I try to examine life's complicated problems and to develop common sense models, processes, techniques and perspectives that you can use to courageously address those challenges, to accept those challenges, or to move away from them as part of taking more responsibility for what happens to you in this, your life. Therefore, my work is not necessarily exploring what is true or false, right or wrong, scientific or unprovable, lawful or unlawful. It's simply about doing anything and everything possible to create within your brain an inner reality of mental calmness and direction, and within your cellular body calmness by desensitizing your nervous system to fear, change, conflict, and learning how to take action without being able to control the outcomes, which of course is the whole concept behind effective ERP. And then you expand this process to increase your cellular, mitochondrial, energetic health so that you have more energy each day through diet, sleep, activity, breath work, and by releasing trapped trauma and stuck energy from your body. Then you further improve your mood by accessing and releasing your natural feel-good peptides and hormones into your inner chemistry. And we do this by running optimistic, trusting, and nice stories in your head, or no stories at all, to placebo or to trick your body into feeling good, regardless of the truth of these stories in any moment. This is just a process. And then by exposing yourself to life, to people and to places, rather than hiding away and sort of sanitizing everything, you'll be developing more life skills, you'll be having more adventures, you'll be uncovering more opportunities, and therefore enhancing all your natural immunity all at the same time. It's just a common sense process that you were probably never taught. We are just consciously tricking, placeboing, influencing and retraining the unconscious aspects of our brain and body to improve our inner reality experience of life, regardless of what is happening in our outer reality experience of life. And we do this regardless of how we were initially conditioned to behave in childhood, and despite what we might have been told to believe is true by parents, schools, universities, science, our doctors, or whatever media, mainstream media rhetoric is trying to influence us to believe and to respond to this month. Think about it. Why can't we sometimes make decisions and take action by following a process, and other times by following our thoughts and feelings? However, it seems to me that anxious or depressed people, they tend to make decisions with their thoughts and their feelings, even if those reactions don't serve them well or make them avoid taking action or abdicate responsibility to somebody else's decision making or to somebody else's plan. Surely taking action via a process, regardless of what your brain or your body wants, is what happens if you are in the army, if you're in the police force, if you are put away in prison, or if you're working in some other heavily regulated job. You do as you are told, no matter what your brain thinks, and it doesn't matter how anxious your body is or whatever feelings you have, you do as you are told, or you'll do what you're paid to do. You get on with it. You just suck up the discomfort or the fear. I suppose if you were trapped in a war zone, or if you were experiencing terrible poverty, you would do what is necessary to survive, regardless of the stories in your brain and the emotions in your body. I sometimes wonder that if we in the West have it a little too easy, thus affording us the luxury of procrastination or letting others look after us or to support us. Now, because this course is all about self-empowerment, and it's all about change, to move out of one state into another state, out of one set of issues into a different set of issues, okay? Surely, if you wish to become a more courageous person, initially, this will involve doubting your old fearful thoughts and ignoring your old fearful feelings. Do you want to be right, conformist, safe, told what to do, and a nice people-pleasing person? Or do you want to be calmer, braver, more self-responsible, more self-deciding, and a good person by your own definition of the term good? And I think there's a huge difference between being a nice person and being a good person. And maybe I should make a video about that. Surely, stress, anxiety, worry, and drama are essentially a clash of narratives between the story of what your inner reality wishes to be happening and what actually is happening in that outer reality. And as I keep telling you, it's much easier to change your inner reality stories, even if you have to consciously fib to your unconscious brain, than it is to change what is happening in that outer world out there. So, if feeling calmer is your intention, then you'll need to put a lot more effort into consciously reprogramming your unconscious each day with the new stories and the new attitudes of the person you desire to become. And you'll need to be reprogramming yourself faster, more often, and with more smarter techniques than the considerable effort that's been put in by governments, religions, big pharma, big food, and the media as they vie for your attention, time, money, health, and to manipulate your behaviors to suit their agendas. And it seems to me that anxious people seem to be the last group to open their eyes wide enough to realize that they are the pawns in somebody else's game of chess, who pretend to serve them, but in truth are playing them to serve their own agendas. And that's why throughout this course, I've been urging you to test everything you've been told, to go and get real-world data to see if these new approaches are true for you, rather than just believing your deeply conditioned intellect and your emotionally hypersensitive and exhausted body. So it's by some discomfort now that you'll find more calmness in the future. And of course, this is the process of ERP. Now the next step becomes a little more fun, because I'd like you to ask yourself, given the choice, would you prefer to live your life as if it were a game? Now, the game of life, where you hunt for opportunities, you courageously ask for what you need, you form alliances, you learn more skills, you get more points, you find some upgrades, you fall in love, you reproduce, you solve the riddles, you raise your energy, and you keep moving up through the levels? Or would you prefer to live your life as best you can within the restrictions of your existing belief systems or the guidelines set by your family, culture, religion, government, or any other person or authority currently controlling your life? And I might refer to living that way as living within a tribal framework where you could be seen as a participant in their game of life. Because whether you currently see life as a game or not might powerfully influence how you might choose to live your life now and going forwards. So I've called this video Playing the Game of Life. Or I could expand that to how might you become the courageous lead actor in your game of life, which will ultimately become the experience of your life. And as the lead actor of your life, are you currently enhancing or sabotaging your advancement through each level of this game? And do you believe that everything ends when this game of life ends? Or do you have faith or hope that death is just a reset, where we lose everything that is not us, but we retain our knowledge and our experiences from this life, which are logged and registered in the formless, energetic, universal iCloud storage of our higher self? And then we get to come back and play again sometime, in a new avatar and are presented with a whole new set of challenges for us to learn and to overcome. And we loop around this game until we've learned enough wisdom to escape this dense frequency loop of matter and are invited to enter the higher frequency energetic realms of higher consciousness and wisdom. And even if that's not true, wouldn't it be a nice story to have running in the unconscious inner reality of our brains? We can lose ourselves in a computer game. We can lose ourselves watching a film or reading a book. Therefore, it's not too hard to accept that our brain and body can temporarily accept fake sensory inputs and assume for them to be true. Especially if you put on one of these virtual reality headsets, it's almost shocking how quickly your brain and body adapt to those inputs as if that experience were real. You might say it's a total body placebo. So what I'm asking you is, what are you consciously doing to make your inner reality more pleasant? And remember, in your inner reality, you can't be punished for imagining that you've harmed someone or mistreated someone or broken some rules. And there are no laws to stop you from imagining the most beautiful thing, a most beautiful mental scenario inside your head, okay? You can dream any dream you wish inside your head, okay? In here, you can do whatever you want to do in your inner reality. Everything is legal, okay? There is no wrong thing you can do. It's your private space for your thinking and your imagination. Similar, if you're playing a computer game, you can do whatever you want to do. It's up to you. So, you could be running stories of all the things that could go wrong. Or you could be running beautiful stories of all the things that could go right. You could cling to negativity or switch to positivity. You could remember all the bad things from your life or remember all the good things from your life. You could play this inner conscious game as a nervous wimp or as a courageous warrior. It's up to you. So this perspective of living your life as if it were a computer game, I think is quite interesting. It's certainly how Jen and I try to live our days these days. And we talk in these ways as well. What can we do to make that better? How can we change our attitude in that moment? How can we drop that? How can we start that? But if you'd asked me to do that 20 years ago, I'd have argued with you about how scary life is and how serious life is, and that we should act with responsibility and we should follow the rules and we should do the right thing. So I can understand any sort of resistance you might have to sort of think in this way. And all I'm trying to say is I made that change 20 years ago now, okay? I managed it. It wasn't easy, but I managed to do it, okay? But to do it, I had to reevaluate so many of my values and my beliefs and these old negative and fearful, pessimistic stories that had been programmed into me that I had about the world around me and the limitations that I had for myself. But it's really worth doing. Do you remember back in video 30 where I asked you to consider what you think truth is? Well, from this inner perspective reality, your truth can be anything that you choose it to be. Of course, in the outer world, there are some shared truths, there are some consequences, but in your inner reality, whatever you choose to think or be true can be true for you. But nobody ever taught you that. For example, in my inner reality, I like myself. So even if people in my outer reality don't like me, it doesn't matter. Therefore, I don't need to be nice to others so they'll like me. I can choose to be nice to people just because I choose to be nice to them, or I can simply ignore them if they're nasty to me or if they add no value to my life. So you see, though I can't take responsibility for everything that happens in the outer reality, I can take a lot more responsibility for how I consciously treat myself in this inner reality. I'm sorry I'm going on about this, but this is so key to the next transition, to the next phase of how I'd like you to start to see yourself and start interacting with the world. Can you see that by focusing on the symptoms of your anxiety, OCD, depression, or life issues will never solve the underlying problems that caused them in the first place. It is by creating a new dream for yourself, who you wish to become and what you wish to do, then taking action towards those dreams, that will begin to address your true underlying issues of boredom, low self-esteem, exhaustion, and not being your true self. And if you're lucky enough to already have a dream about what you want from life, which few people do, what might you do now to stop procrastinating and take any action towards it? How can you explore how you might pull it closer in time to this point called now, which is the only time and place where you can facilitate the process of making change happen or making things begin to happen. Bring everything, if you've got dreams, bring them forward. Find ways to bring them forward. Life is too short. You have to start grabbing hold of these things. It seems to me that anxious people tend to fall into the trap of believing that if they wait long enough, things will resolve themselves. Or if they wait a bit longer, some circumstances will change which might allow them to take action. But 99% of the time, this is not true. If you aren't strong enough to take action now towards your best life, you won't have the strength to do it later either. You'll always be at the mercy of life or at the mercy of somebody else's plan for you. I like the story of a beautiful island where everything is perfect, just how you wish it to be. And it's called the Someday Isle. Someday I'll have enough money. Someday I'll be calm enough. Someday I'll decide what I want for my life. Someday I'll get a job. Someday I'll learn how to speak up for myself. And of course, this is a mythical isle. Much like it's mythical to expect your life will change unless you make it change. And once you can see this from a new perspective, it's easier to ask yourself, what am I doing each day to input an action or two into the outer matrix of life to influence it in my favor? Let me give you an example of how powerful a change in perspective might be that someone with a more anxious disposition may have missed. What if an actor or a singer were about to go on stage in front of a huge live audience and you ask them, are you feeling anxious? And they might say, I feel terrified. My body's shaking. My brain is telling me I can't do this, that I'll forget my words, that I'll freeze or choke up, and then everybody will be judging me and I'll never be able to work again. And you might say, wow, how can you still do this? And they might reply, well, I've just learned to not trust or believe my brain, and I have the courage to take action even though my body is scared, because I know that the feeling I'll get afterwards from doing something this life-changing and this life-engaging will be absolutely worth this temporary discomfort. And even if my acting goes wrong in some manner, I can respectfully say to myself, well, at least I tried. And I've been told that most good people in the audience would actually feel compassion for me if I messed up in some way, if I could recover well and laugh at myself, because they know that nobody's perfect. And they already probably think that I'm courageous and inspirational just for putting myself in this situation in the first place. Can you see that this perspective is actually quite sensible? So how is it that an actor can have intrusive thoughts and anxious feelings, yet ignore them, and still take actions towards doing what they desire to do, yet a person with anxiety or OCD believes that they must avoid anything that causes their brain or their body discomfort? Let me give you another example. In her 20s, my wife Jen was a fashion and catwalk model. And she tells many stories of being absolutely paralyzed with fear, yet still getting on with what needed to be done at any particular show. And she told me about one particular event in London, and seconds before she was walking out onto the catwalk, she was so anxious due to the audience being made up of top fashion designers and buyers that she had to throw up into a waste paper basket seconds before stepping out onto the catwalk and pretending to be all calm and serene as she glided down there, smiling as if nothing had happened. This is called acting, or we can call it pretending. And remember, how you feel is much less important than the virtual reality story that you set up in those around you who are observing and experience your act, right? Which influence later on how they treat you and how they see you. And I think what makes this experience even more ironic is that from that event, she was spotted and recruited by a leading design house to be their international model, traveling to all the famous venues like New York, Paris, and Munich, because they loved the confidence and the calmness she exuded. It's just a game. It's the game of life. And how you play that game will influence the outcomes of your life, whatever they may be. And you can't know what they will be until they unfold, but they're unlikely to unfold with you sitting at home hoping for something to happen. So I'm asking you to consider how you might become an actor. Because if you can learn to play any part through lots of practice, which we might call ERP, you'll have more chances of landing a job, of getting into a relationship, and being able to courageously ask for whatever you want in any situation. Because if you're going to engage with the game of life, acting and pretending and playing, I think would be really, really useful skills to develop and to hone and to maximize your efficiency. And people say to me, yeah, John, but actors are extroverts, they're show-offs, they're great communicators, they're funny and they're talented because they can sing and they can dance and they can remember all these lines. And I'd say, yeah, because they went to dance classes, they went to terrifying auditions, they put themselves in the middle of a singing class and watched everybody judge them, okay? They exposed themselves to what they desired and prevented the responses from their brain and body from preventing them from taking action. ERP. And what about people like Keanu Reeves, Harrison Ford, Emma Watson? They're not extroverts, they're introverts. And to me, that type of actor, I think, are especially heroic for following their desires despite being quiet, shy, sensitive and reserved. This was how I overcame my anxiety, by prioritizing my formless, energetic soul's need to expand into life over my brain's thoughts or my body's feelings to avoid discomfort or embarrassment. The rider, my soul, can be calm even if my horse, my brain and body are anxious. And with repetition, they become less anxious and more proficient. It still amazes me that so few anxious people realize that exposure to the repetition of failure is how you develop experience and confidence. It's just a process. Okay? It's just like in the boss section at the end of a level of a computer game. To access the next level, you might fail 50 times until you figure it out and you perfect that skill. And many nervous people are happy to do that in a computer game, but won't take that same common sense philosophy and apply it to their lives. ERP on who you wish to become and what you wish to do with your life is the fastest way to improve yourself and your life, assuming that improving yourself and your life is a desire higher up your decision-making framework than avoiding fear, embarrassment, discomfort. You know, as I discussed in the workbook associated with video 32 part 2. And if you haven't filled that in yet, and I know it's hard, but if you haven't filled that in yet, you haven't even started. And if you have completed that workbook, you might want to revisit it and make any changes that allow this new perspective to be incorporated in this hierarchy. Can you see that when we add common sense process to life, it becomes much harder for your old brain stories and your old cover stories and your old existing beliefs to retain their old levels of power. And if you can't answer the question, who do I wish to become and what do I wish to do, then you will be played by life. Life will play you. You'll do what your family does. You'll believe what you're told rather than trying things out. You'll defer responsibility to others. You'll follow other people's rules and fear saying what you truly wish to say. And all I'm saying is that really how you wish to play this game of life? I've said this before, but it's such a profound statement. Brené Brown nailed it when she said that the definition of courage is feeling vulnerable yet still taking action. It's so damn simple. Scary, yes, but the process is simple. So this phase of the course as I move forward is focused on motivating, inspiring, shocking, urging, nudging and pushing you into action and helping you to break your old patterns of fearful thinking, procrastination or whatever self-limiting and sabotaging behaviors you may currently have. All the tools you need are in these previous 52 videos. Have you watched them all? How many times have you cycled around them all? Did you read all the books? Did you listen to the meditations? Have you fully immersed yourself in the ERP process? Or are you still consciously or unconsciously sabotaging yourself and your own recovery? Or maybe, just maybe, turning life into a bit more of a game might be the new perspective which drives you forward. Let me remind you of the work of Dr. Donald Hoffman, who I introduced you back into video 43, whose experiments showed that those who took direct action on their needs for things like relationships, sex, money, food, jobs, social integration, without too much thinking, normally outsurvive and outperform those who try to examine the truth of any situation or to try to fully understand everything before they take action, or who are afraid of trying new things in case they might fail. It's kind of obvious really, take action towards your desires, see what happens, adjust your strategy in response to that outcome, see what happens, take action, rinse and repeat towards your intentions. It's just a process. I remember in the late 90s, I worked for a large software company as a technical sales engineer, and the management implemented a strategy called fail fast forward, whereby we were told to embrace failure as part of the innovation and learning process. We were told to accept that failure as inevitable, and that it's better to fail quickly and learn from it than to waste time trying to make a flawed concept actually work. And I remember at that time, this perspective of knowing that if I tried new things and they didn't work, that I wouldn't be fired, it really allowed my natural creativity to be released. And it enabled me to experiment and play with new concepts, which then grew my confidence and it grew my skill set quite enormously. But I was never taught these strategies in school. I had to learn them all in later life, and then I had to overwrite all my old stories with this new narrative that I'd learned. And I think Dr. Hoffman's concepts translate beautifully to the computer or the life is a game model too. A person just diving into a game, looking under every stone, interacting with every person and trying to get all the energy, the tools, the skills and all the points will quickly move up the levels and gain more experience through failing often, and will of course outperform a person who doesn't play very often or is afraid of losing or who gives up if it gets a little too difficult. And one last thought on this acting metaphor. I'd like you to consider, are you currently living your life as a bit like a typecast actor who always plays the same roles, like a henchman, a villain, a nervous Nelly, a Bond girl, or an extra, or a face in the crowd, an NPC? Yeah, sure, they have a small part to play, but they'll never be picked for any other roles as they're too rigid, they're too inflexible, they're unable to adapt to all the varied opportunities the acting world has to offer. you might say limited by their own beliefs and afraid of change and afraid of attempting something new or addressing something bigger. Okay. I hope this is making sense. I'd like to share with you a recent aha moment that one of my clients told me about as he followed the process of reprogramming himself from his pure OCD and adapting to using his ADHD brain configuration in more creative and productive manners. And during one of our conversations, I mentioned to him that that I found writing quite difficult, and I'd have many concepts in my mind, and I tried to put them into a story, and very often I would get stuck when writing new scripts for videos. And he offered to read what I had written in its sort of basic form and offered to provide feedback to me to help me to consider if it's making sense and the needs of my audience from his perspective. And we agreed. So I began to share my thought process and my writing process from concept right through to my final script for my Video 50 5-part ERP series of videos. That's 5 hours of video. And his input was incredibly helpful, so thank you for that. And we went through many iterations with him reading, adding ideas, and then reviewing my changes, rereading it again, and this information passed backwards and forwards. And by the time I'd finished those 5 videos, he told me that he'd read them so many times that he found it easy to remember all the teachings, and because he just had been reading them over and over and over again, they had been adopted by his unconscious, and he was just applying them naturally to his life. And he said that this had motivated him to go back and revisit all the earlier recordings throughout the course. And as he rewatched the earlier videos, he realized that he had forgotten that much of what he'd been taught in those earlier videos, okay? But the information he had from the stuff that he'd been editing, his brain had retained all that information because he had read it so many times and he was emotionally connected to that information and that knowledge. And he concluded that his ADHD brain had benefited from the intense repetition and the emotional engagement in that subject matter that he enjoyed. And he found that so interesting. And he said to me, it's like what you said right from the beginning of all of the videos, repetition is key, but I just assumed that if I'd seen it once, that was okay. But now I know how key repetition is. Our brains are adaptable, they're malleable, and they're retrainable. And silly us if we're not consciously trying to make that inner experience as wonderful as possible through the repetition of a new, more favorable inner story, even if it's not true. We need to keep practicing, right? And playing and repeating. It's like learning a new language, okay? Reprogramming your brain requires repetition and immersion. No one would expect you to learn a new language just by reviewing a phrase book or watching a single YouTube video once a month. This applies to all forms of learning. So I would like to end this video by exploring some of the challenges you might face as you transition to becoming the lead character in your game of life. I believe that the main obstacles to achieving inner freedom stem from our childhood conditioning. During our upbringing, we were exposed to various family values, cultural beliefs, religious teachings, and other influential ideas that became ingrained in our subconscious minds. And although these patterns may seem deeply rooted, it doesn't mean we have to accept or act upon them. The challenge now lies in how we can embrace new perspectives while those old beliefs linger in the background like echoes from the past that we are learning to ignore. Might we switch to a new character's perspective, from the victim to the protagonist? And you say, you know what? I don't want to play that old game anymore. And as the lead character in your new game of life, Might you turn to those tribal characters around you in your existing life and say, hey, listen, I love you and I respect you, and I wish you all well in the game that you are playing, but I'm going to go and play a new game. I'm going to go and play a different game because I desire and I deserve much more from my life. Then, like in my guided meditation number 4, in your mind, in your imagination, in your heart, you cut those tribal emotional cords and you take all the positive lessons and learnings from the tribe. Yeah? Perhaps changing how you connect with those people, maybe letting go of memories and traumas, okay? And if necessary, releasing low energy responses like being attached to the ego, pride, guilt, shame and blame, and you choose to let them go. We can love those people for who they are rather than who we wish them to be. And we can loosen the grip that our tribes have on us as we develop and expand our lives on new terms, better suited for the life that we desire to live. And we might also consider how we can consciously break some of those old tribal patterns so that they're not passed down to our children and our grandchildren, as I discussed in video 29 in my replicator model. Now, the second perspective I'd like you to consider is, rather than focusing on what you like about your lead character, how might you spend a little time focusing on the stories about your lead character's perceived weaknesses? Is he too small, too weak, too bald, too shy, too fat, too thin, too boring? Is he uncomfortable with confrontation, public speaking, or scared of failure or rejection? Because if you're going to be the lead character, you're only as strong as your weakest link, both internally through self-criticism or externally through feeling judged or fearing rejection. But if you can learn to accept or love that inferior aspect of yourself, then you'll stop being horrible to yourself. And if others bring it up, you can just smile because it no longer bothers you. I recently heard a lady talking to a manager in a shop, and she said, bear with me because I'm really uncomfortable with conflict, and when I get angry I struggle to say what I truly feel. However, I feel that I've been treated badly and this needs to be said. And she went on to make her complaint, and I thought to myself, wow, that was really courageous. She had owned and accepted those weaker aspects of her skill set, and she didn't let them stop her from taking action, though she was both anxious and angry. If I apply it back to myself, in the first half of my life, I disliked being small, and I disliked going bald. Okay, they were issues that deeply troubled me, especially as a young man. Okay, but then in my mid-30s, I learned these skills that I'm sharing with you. And these days, I love being myself. I accept my height, I accept my baldness with no reservations. All that changed was a deep love and acceptance of myself. And when people say, oh, you're really quite small, I just smile when I say something like, yeah, I love it, thank you, right? It doesn't have to be an issue for me, even if other people try to make it so. So my recommendation for you is this. Things that you dislike about yourself that you can't change, learn to accept them deeply. Stop focusing on them, and stop trying to hide them. And that which potentially you could change, well, get on with changing it, no matter how awkward they may be in the beginning. Act your way through as part of your ERP process. I also have great respect for people who join the organization called Toastmasters. And this group teaches you how to communicate effectively, how to think on your feet during conversations, and how to present confidently. And participants who go along not only learn better communication skills, but also learn how to be comfortable with being the center of attention, for asking what they want, and for just presenting themselves. Now, these are really useful life skills, not just for doing presentations, but as just part of your job, but also for dating, for asking what you want, for standing up for yourself and going for job interviews. But I think more importantly, learning those communication skills is the ERP experience of turning up and bravely accepting the emotional discomfort of learning how to present in front of other people. Yeah? Which you can do in a safe environment where everybody's supporting you and everybody's wishing you the best. And I've always thought that the smart people at Toastmasters realize it doesn't matter if another person there is a better presenter than them. What's important is that they are improving themselves and they are desensitizing their body's fear so that they can be more effective in their own game of life. It's a really, really powerful process, and one I would recommend to everybody, because bravery and courage are the ultimate antidote to the fear of anxiety and the boredom of depression. Now, another powerful tool your lead character can adopt for use within this game of life is the concept of choosing the right conscious attitude for any given moment or situation. As I've said many times, I don't think there is much we can consciously or unconsciously always control and always get the exact outcomes we desire. Almost nothing. However, it is possible to temporarily, consciously choose an attitude that we can consciously try to keep our awareness on until our conscious awareness is distracted or we slip back into our old unconscious programs. Let me give you an example. It's like our lead character consciously remembering to be Sherlock Holmes while he's on the stage, while he's doing the play. So he'll be consciously holding those attitudes of defiance, curiosity, arrogance, impatience, detachment, and logical thinking front of mind for the 2 hours that he's on the stage, and then he'll just slip back into his own unconscious self afterwards. I think that people often fail to realize that concepts like happiness, gratitude, forgiveness, and optimism are fundamentally just conscious attitudes that with intense repetition may become automated unconscious responses. And I know this to be true because I used to be a pessimist, but now I'm an optimist, right? Because I consciously reprogram my old pessimistic brain with optimistic routines. Yes, it took me a year or two, but it was totally worth it, because living life as an optimist is so much more fun and so much less stressful than as a pessimist. Imagine all the good things can happen is far easier than imagining all the bad things that can happen. So what I'm asking you is, what conscious attitudes might your lead character wish to practice adopting that might expand their effectiveness in this game? And I think the best high energy attitudes are really quite simple. Attitudes like honesty, integrity, humility, willingness, courage, trust, hope, love, and acceptance. Those attitudes are so more effective than low energy ones like fear, doubt, pessimism, control, anger, apathy, and the negative results that they produce like gossiping and complaining, arguing, jealousy, envy, resentfulness, and holding grudges. Can you see that this is just a process? So, my next tip for your lead actor is a big one. And that is to stop having important conversations via email or text. If you need to ask a person to do something important, or you need to negotiate some financial deal, or if you need to reprimand another person, or you need to ask for some help, do it face to face. Look into their eyes and say what needs to be said for your better life. And I know that it can be easier to text, but it's also easier for them to say no by text or to ignore you by text. Can your lead character perform in new ways that are courageous, which force them to own sorting out their life and becoming more comfortable with the discomfort of taking more responsibility for the outcomes of their life? This one technique is a game changer. Okay, in learning the art of self-worth, which is, as I keep telling you, and I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but this is just the way it is. Self-worth is the ability to be nice to yourself and to influence others to treat you with respect, and for you not to take personally whatever they say or whatever they do. So as I close this video, ask yourself, how might I become the lead actor in my game of life? How might I turn off my real computer games, stop watching other actors on television, and step into my own new story? How may I switch to following the desires of my heart for the life I wish to lead, rather than listening to the pessimistic thoughts of my conditioned brain, or the oversensitive and out-of-date reactions from my body? And I wonder who you'll become, where you'll focus your creativity and courage as you learn new skills and as you address those aspects of your life that once changed will move you up to the next level. It's just a process. It's just the game of life. Okay, as ever, thanks for listening. And let's get out there. Let's start playing the game of life.